Happy International Women's Day. I'm reading from Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Reed, and this is a scene where Cimmerine, the princess, is talking to Kazul, her dragon. Of course, Kazul responded matter-of-factly. I was old enough to participate in the tests when the last king died. She smiled reminiscently. I got farther than anyone expected me to, though I wasn't one of the top 10 by any means. Cimmerine tilted her head to one side, considering. I think I'm glad you didn't win. Oh, why is that? Kazul sounded amused. Because you wouldn't have had any use for a princess if you were the queen of the dragons, and if you hadn't decided to take me on, that yellow-green dragon Morans would probably have eaten me, Cimmerine explained. You mean if I were the king of the dragons, Kazul corrected her. Queen of the dragons is a dull job. But you're a female, Cimmerine said. If you'd carried Colin Stone from the Fort of Whispering Snakes to the Vanishing Mountain, you'd have had to be queen, wouldn't you? No, of course not, Kazul said. Queen of the Dragons is a totally different job from king, and it's not one I'm particularly interested in. Most people aren't. I think the position's been vacant since Oran tore his wing and had to retire. But King Tokos is a male dragon, Cimmerine said, and then frowned. Isn't he? Yes, but that has nothing to do with it, Kazul said testily. King is the name of the job. It doesn't matter who holds it. Cimmerine stopped and thought for a moment. You mean that dragons don't care whether their king is male or female? The title is the same no matter who the ruler is? That's right. We like to keep things simple. Oh. Cimmerine decided to return to the original topic of conversation before the dragon's simple ideas confused her any further. The end.
Girl Genius, a zany lamplight gaslight fantasy featuring all sorts of zany steampunk elements and, of course, mad science. In this scene, Agatha Heterodyne, the heir to the evil Heterodyne Empire, who is, of course, most famous now for the heroics of the previous generation, she is now meeting the heir to the Empire Wolfenbach. Here comes that romance. Miss Agatha Clay, sir, the butler introduces her. Ah, Miss Clay, says Baron Gilgamesh Wolfenbach, heir to the Empire. Glad to see you on your feet. Bring me the left-handed tuning wrench, won't you? Which she does, with a very terse here. Right, so much for small talk, says the heir to the Empire. Let's have this out right now. Sit down. There's nothing to, she says. There's nothing to sit down on. But there's only one place to sit, in the cockpit of the aircraft that he's working on. So that's where she sits. And he talks about her parents, and she looks surprised. Ah, that hit a nerve, he said. Wrong! My parents are simple, normal people, she protests. Did they tell you that you were sleeping all of yesterday and today? Says the prince. Agatha looks, well, what does that have to do with, oh, so that doesn't surprise you at all. It surprises me that you slept for 2 days. It doesn't surprise you? How did you do that? I don't know, she says. Uh-huh, let's talk about Von Zinzer. Who? Your boyfriend, Von Zinzer? The man you built clanks with? The man you came here with? Your boyfriend, though your fiancé, any of this ringing a bell? I never... No, as in, not your boyfriend? No, as in he's nice. Alright. Well, let's have this thing a go. And they launch the flying machine, and fall out through the bottom of the Zeppelin. What have you done? Agatha cries. Ha! Watch this, says the Baron. Nothing happens. Oh, great, says Agatha. A falling machine. I'm so impressed. Weird. It worked perfectly on paper, says the Baron. And Agatha takes a closer look. Check the engine. Here, fuel here, spark here. What is this? A balancing arm? Why do you have a balancing arm? Yes, well, you do. And this, a heat dump, superfluous. What? You can enlarge the flywheel here, pull this part out, dump this heat dump here, and look at that, the machine works. So, of course, later on, once they crash and they're home from this adventure, Agatha is mostly impressed because he listened to my suggestions. He actually tried out my ideas. Nobody ever listens to me. This is wonderful. Girl Genius.
The book is Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. And I'm just going to read the second paragraph of the book. Reese had already diagnosed her own problem. She did not know how to be alone. She fled from her own company, from her own solitude. Along with telling her how awful her cheating men were, her friends also told her that after 2 major breakups, she needed time to learn to be herself, by herself. But she couldn't be alone in any kind of moderate way. Give her a week to herself and she began to isolate, cultivating an ash pile of loneliness that built on itself exponentially until she was daydreaming about selling everything and drifting away on a boat toward nowhere. To jolt herself back to life, she went on Grindr or Tinder or wherever and administered 10,000 volts of to the heart by chasing the most dramatic tachycardia of an affair she could find. Married men were the best for fleeing loneliness because married men also didn't know how to be alone. Married men were experts at being together, at not letting go, no matter what, until death do us part. With the pretense of setting the boundaries of just an affair, Reese would swan dive super deep, super hard. By telling herself it would just be a fling, she gave herself permission to fulfill every fetish the guy had ever dreamed of, to unearth his every secret hurt, to debase herself in the most lush, vicious, and unsustainable ways, then collapse into resentment, sadness, and spite that it had just been a fling, because hadn't she been brave enough and vulnerable enough to dive super deep, super hard?
Hi folks, I'm reading from Louise Fitzhugh's Harriet the Spy, which is one of the books that made me, and this is my copy from grade 3 that I read over 40 times, and my mom finally bought me my own copy from the Scholastic Book Fair, and then my partner had it bound, so major points scored. This is the first book that I really identified because on the cover was a little girl who wasn't wearing a dress and didn't have pigtails. And then the content of the book was about this kid being brutally honest and trying to, navigate in the world and the consequences of being brutally honest as well. So this is a little bit about Harriet and Old Golly, which is kind of her nanny. So this is after she had just finished writing in her notebook. Harriet put the book down and ran into Old Golly's room to kiss her goodnight. Old Golly sat in a rocker in the light of an overhead lamp, reading. Harriet flew into the room and bounded right into the center of the billowy yellow quilt which covered the single bed. Everything in the room was yellow, from the walls to the vase of chrysanthemums. Old Golly took to yellow, as she put it. This is a picture of Old Golly. Take your feet off the bed, Old Golly said without looking up. What does your mother think about? Asked Harriet. I don't know, said Old Golly in a musing way, still looking at her book. I've wondered that for years. What are you reading? Harriet asked. Dostoevsky. What is that? Asked Harriet in a thoroughly obnoxious way. Well, listen to this. Old Golly said, and got that quote look on her face. Love all God's creation, the whole and every grain of sand in it. Love every leaf, every ray of God's light. Love the animals, love the plants, love everything. If you love everything, you will perceive the divine mystery in things. And once you perceive it, you will begin to comprehend it better every day. And you will come at last to love the whole world with an all-embracing love. What does that mean? Harriet asked after she had been quiet a minute. Well, what do you think it means? Well, maybe if you love everything, then I guess you'll know everything, and then it seems like you love everything more, and I don't know. Well, that's about it. Old Golly looked at Harriet in as gentle a way as she could, considering that her face looked like it was cut out of oak. I want to know everything, screeched Harriet suddenly, lying back and bouncing up and down on the bed. Everything in the world, everything, everything. I will be a spy and know everything. Well, it won't do you a bit of good to know everything if you don't do anything with it. Now get up, Miss Harriet the Spy. You're going to sleep now. And with that, old Golly marched over and grabbed Harriet by the ear. Ouch! Said Harriet as she was led to her room, but it really didn't hurt. There, now, into bed. Will Mommy and Daddy be home in time to kiss me good night? They will not, said old Golly as she tucked Harriet in. They went to a party. You'll see them in the morning at breakfast. Now, to sleep, instantly. Hee, said Harriet. Instant sleep. Ah, and not another word out of you. Tomorrow you go back to school. Old Golly leaned over and gave her a hard little peck on the forehead. Old Golly was never very kissy, which Harriet thought was just as well as she hated it. Old Golly turned the light out, and Harriet listened to her go back into her room, which was right across the hall, pick up her book, and sit down in the rocker again. Then Harriet did what she always did when she was supposed to be asleep. She got out her flashlight, put the book she was currently reading under the covers, and read happily until old Golly came in and took the flashlight away, as she did every night. Happy International Women's Day, all you women and people of the world.
I'll be reading from Wild Magic by Tamora Pierce. Following her out of the gate's inner yard, Dane saw more wonders. Around them soared the levels of the palace, with wings and turrets in many styles, telling of additions over time. She saw more glass in her look than she'd seen in her life. Her nose smelled flowers, both plain and exotic. Her ears were filled with creaking wagons, shouting people, and the clang of metal. A Nua led them downhill. Chief among the buildings they passed were large stables, rich with horse smells. Dane would have stopped there, but Anua walked on. Before them lay meadows dotted with grazing animals. Behind the hordes were masses of trees, the real forest, said the Khmer. The road ended at the meadows, where two long wooden buildings had been built. One was a stable, a neat and quiet one. The other, connected to the stable by a covered walk, was a 2-story barracks. Before it was a tall pole, a flag at its tip. As if showing the banner off, the wind lifted it up with a pop. A red horse reared on a gold-brown field. The Queen's riders, said Anua, home, or at least as much of one as I need.
A library in the middle of a community is a cross between an emergency exit, a life raft, and a festival. They are cathedrals of the mind, hospitals of the soul, theme parks of the imagination. On a cold, rainy island, they're the only sheltered public spaces where you're not a consumer, but a citizen instead. A human with a brain and a heart and a desire to be uplifted, rather than a customer with a credit card and an inchoate need for stuff. A mall, the shops, are places where your money makes the wealthy wealthier. But a library is where the wealthy's taxes pay for you to become a little more extraordinary instead. A satisfying reversal, a balancing of the power.